Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Two Bob. My name is Craig. It's about 25 minutes past 11 in the morning. It's Saturday, the 27th of July, 2024. It's a beautiful day in Brisbane, slightly overcast, but it's heading for a maximum of 20 degrees centigrade. So should be just a typical winter's day, slightly lower than normal. But anyway, today's topic is the mainstream media. We're going to talk about the mainstream media. I personally believe that the mainstream media is a system of control. It's basically a means to psychologically corral people into acting and thinking in a certain way in what I call a centralized area. Now, to understand the media, we need to kind of go to the basics. There are two things, a story and a narrative. What is a story? Story is basically a reference to the nature of something. For example, a crime scene. A crime scene exhibits data, raw data in relation to its existence. A crime scene, for example, contains broken glass, bullets, dead bodies, tire screeching marks on the ground. There are aspects of the crime scene which inhibit raw data. That raw data constitutes the actual story of what happened. Now you think about it, a detective rocks up to a crime scene and they want to know the story. What's the story, Morning Glory? What's going on here? Okay, so that's a story. Now, as soon as, let's suppose that a detective was to understand the story of something, a crime scene, and that detective then tells someone, that then becomes a narrative, right? Because that detective then becomes the narrator of a story. The mainstream media acts in a very similar manner. Now, the media gets its name from the term medium. A medium is an object that allows one thing to travel from one end to another. For example, a telecommunications wire, or a road that separates two towns, A and B. So what the media does, it analyzes a story and then provides you with a narrative that's given in relation to a story. Now, it's a critical thing to understand that every narrative has a narrator. So the mainstream media is like a narrator of a given story. So when you watch the evening news, what you're seeing is narratives given to you by the media in relation to stories that they cover. Now, one thing to understand about the mainstream media is basically those media organisations that have garnered mainstream trust. For example, in my home country of Australia, we have 5 mainstream media organisations. We have Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 10, ABC and the SBS. Now, people in general typically trust these organisations to give them up-to-date information about relevant stories that are going on in the country as well as around the world. Now, the thing to understand about the mainstream media is that the mainstream media is full of people that are just like you and me. They've got mortgages to pay, they've got school fees, they've got car fees, all kinds of fees and all kinds of expenses, food expenses. And so they don't want to rock the boat in relation to their company, because if you rock the boat, you then become a threat to your own financial security. So the people within the media are just like you and me in that they don't want to upset the apple cart, rock the boat, as I just mentioned. And so what are we really talking about here? The average person in the media, mainstream media, they have free will. Just like you and me, we have free will. We have the freedom, whatever comes out of their mouth is a projection of what they choose to say, what they want to say. So the media, what that means is that any given narrative in relation to a story can vary in consistency with respect to that story. Some narratives can be more consistent, other narratives can be less consistent. It all depends on what it is that these media people choose to tell you. That's the thing you need to understand. Now think about the one thing that you and we do on a daily basis. We offer what's known as conditional trust. Conditional trust is a mechanism where you trust someone on a given subject if they don't lie to you about that subject. But if it's another subject which they do lie to you about, then obviously you don't trust them on that matter. For example, imagine someone who loves tennis, a tennis player who loves tennis, but they have a tendency to exaggerate and lie about the game of tennis. Now, when it comes to tennis, obviously you don't trust that person because they have a record, a history of lying to you about certain aspects of the game. That doesn't mean they're going to lie to you about anything else, like the weather or poetry or food or anything like that. It's conditional trust. You trust them by default when it comes to things that they haven't lied to you about. That's the same. That's the thing. That's what I urge you to have with the mainstream media. Now, as I said here, the mainstream media is a system of control. What does that mean? Consider the term conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory. You've heard this term before. And a sister term would be conspiracy theorist. That's a derogatory term that's labelled on people. So if the media brands you as a conspiracy theorist, obviously they're telling the target audience not to go any further with this person. They'll be up here type of thing. So the best way to think about the media is to consider an electric fence. A farmer has a paddock full of cattle. The grass is running low, so he takes his cattle onto the side of the road and sets up a perimeter, a grazing area perimeter. Sets up an electric fence around this grazing area, and he allows his cattle to graze merrily. Now, what happens when one of the cows makes contact with an electric fence? It receives a shock, and it keeps receiving that shock until it learns to stay away from the fence. Well, the mainstream media kind of acts in a very similar regard. They use the term conspiracy theory to really set up this psychological electric fence, so to speak. And so they're using it to encourage people not to deviate too far in their thinking and their attitude. And I think they do this because they do this in advance to prevent people from exposing the true nature of the media itself, which is, as I said here, a system of control. Now, another way we can think of the media is a special type of there's a prison in South America, whether it's Colombia or whether it's Uruguay. Can't remember the country. It's a prison where most of the actual rules are enforced by the prisoners themselves. So you have prison staff. In a typical Western prison, the rules are enforced by the staff, the prison staff. But in this case, in this type of prison in South America, it's enforced by people. So what the media does, the media is kind of like the gatekeepers of this system of control which occurs inside the actual prison itself. Most of the people that use the term conspiracy theory are people that have nothing to do with the media. Now let's examine the word conspiracy theory. A conspiracy is just a crime which involves two or more people. A theory is just an explanation of something. But how often have you heard the term conspiracy theory used to describe anything that has nothing to do with a conspiracy? It's a highly abused term. And so what the media does is, if someone is thinking, they're trying to set up a psychological fear zone, in the sense that if you think in a certain way, you're going to be branded by society as a conspiracy theorist. And I submit to you, there are many people that are terrified of the idea of being thought of as a conspiracy theorist. They're terrified of that. Right? And so when a person becomes a conspiracy theorist, they're trying to avoid this. It's like an electric fence, but they can see the fence there. So cattle can't see the fence. They learn. So that people can see what's going on in advance. And so they think, well, I better not think in this direction because I'll then become a conspiracy theorist. Now, the mainstream media uses other terms as well. It uses left wing, right wing, far right, far left. These are all just derogatory terms. These are all used to set up this culture of fear that prevents people from wandering too far away from this centralised area in terms of how they think and act and their general attitude towards life. Now, let me ask you, why is the media really like this? As I said to you before, they're trying to cover up their tracks. They're trying to cover up the fact that it's a system of control, right? That's essentially what it is. But why are they really doing this? Think of a fragile package that's being sent air freight, and in this package contains champagne glasses, and on the side of the package says the word fragile in it. See, the trust in the mainstream media is just as fragile as it is for those champagne glasses. It is fragile as. And so the media acts in advance to really maximise that sense of trust that people have in the media. But it's highly volatile, because once people realise it's a system of control, then they stop really trusting in it. Now, as I said to you before, I trust in the media, but I only trust those things they don't lie about. For example, I'm an AFL supporter. My team is Essendon. I like watching football on the television. Now, when they give you a score, I believe it. Why do I believe it? Because the mainstream media has a history of telling you the truth in relation to sport. So I continue to believe what they say when it comes to sport. However, when it comes to certain geopolitical things like COVID, 9/11 and climate change, and I'll talk about these in up and coming posts, they're just lying to you. They're just pulling the wool over your eyes, right? And if you question that mainstream media's narratives on these things, then you're a conspiracy nutball. You're a weirdo. You're a left winger or right winger. You know, the whole left wing, right wing paradigm is false. It's a false paradigm. There's no such thing as left wing or right wing, right? Every economic system requires a government, right? And the only question is what relationship should the government have with the economy that it's governing over, right? And this idea of labelling someone as a left winger or a right winger is just ludicrous, right? It's typically thought of as a left winger is typically thought of as someone who believes that the government should have lots of control, and a right winger is thought of as someone like a capitalist who believes they should have very little control. But what if the government was a bad government? Then I don't want that government to have any control, really. But if it's a good government, yeah, I want them to interfere as much as they can, just as long as the end result, the result is a positive result for the society in question. Okay, I'm getting a low battery here. So let me summarise my position. The mainstream media is a system of control, right? What they do is they analyse a story and they take that story and turn it into a narrative. As soon as the media tells you something, they're giving you a narrative, okay? So when a politician changes their mind, it's the politician that's changing the story. It's the media that changes their narrative, all right? One of the things that media does to cover its tracks is it says that it's the politicians that change their narrative. No, it's not. It's politicians that change their story. It's the media that changes their narrative. It's critical for you to understand that. And the media uses terms like conspiracy theory, conspiracy theorist, right-winger, left-winger. These are nothing but derogatory terms used to establish a psychological zone for which you have to be within, psychologically, up here. And if you deviate too far, then you're going to be accused as being, you're going to be thought of by society as a conspiracy theorist. And that's what people are generally afraid of. Okay, so that's pretty much all I want to say about the matter. Now, I've given a few blogs over the last couple of weeks. There's one thing I really want you to take from these blogs: conditional trust. I briefly mentioned it before. The mainstream media is generally trustworthy when it comes to about 98% of all the issues. It's the remaining 2% that they lie to you about. But those remaining 2% of issues are highly pertinent. There's far-reaching, globally, geopolitically far-reaching events like 9/11, COVID, climate change, the Federal Reserve System and so on and so forth. So the media is just not telling you the truth when it comes to those type of issues. So please, when the media lies to you about something, that's when you just, okay, I'm not going to trust you. I'm just going to look at other sources and compare what you say to other sources, right? And make up my own mind. Just make up your own mind. You are responsible for what you believe. The media is not your friend. Television does not love you. No, your mum loves you, your dad loves you. And television, which threatens to become a third parent, but it definitely does not love you. It sometimes makes you feel better than your mum or dad, but it does not love you. At the end of the day, television does not love you. You need to understand that. That's the most critical thing of all my posts. Television does not love you, but God does. So on that note, I'll bid you farewell.